So, are you in Florida at the moment?
Yes, I'm in Florida. Not in Miami where I was born, but I'm in the other side, Marco Island on the West Coast.
Can you please enlighten me on why so many people in America hate on Florida? Because when I look at it, it looks amazing.
Yeah, I also wonder because I mean, I'm sure that we're in very divided times, to be honest, and the country has probably made some decisions of what they like and don't like, and there are some who are not keen on Florida. But I don't think it's for the things I love about Florida. It's the nature. It's I was 17 years in California at the studio for Nissan. It's a beautiful nature. Also, California is spectacular, um, but the water is very cold and a little bit dry. It's more desert beauty. And Florida is a bit lush, and it's more about a kind of wet beauty. And I encourage you to come. Don't listen to
I
the negatives.
no,
Come
I
to the
no one will stop me from going there because it looks amazing. I grew up on the coast in South Africa, and I've always I've always gravitated towards the ocean, and especially I don't. It was obviously romanticized a lot, but there was a great series on Netflix called Bloodline. I don't know if you've seen that, but it was set in
yeah.
Florida, and I was like, "Wow, okay." It was a dark series, but the setting was just magic. It looked great.
Mhm. Yeah, I grew up in Miami, as I mentioned before. But I grew up a long time ago. Sorry to say for myself. I was born in '64. Miami was tiny, actually. Miami, the Miami people know now, I would say, is after the '90s, after Madonna, Versace, all these wonderful characters who brought interest and a different type of life, brought luxury to Miami, to be honest. And I lived in Tom Sawyer, Miami, where you
Okay.
spend your days on the mangrove forest. I didn't live on the beach. I lived South Florida, South Miami. And I spent my days on my little boat, exploring, water skiing, this kind of thing, island hopping, uh, almost every day. So
That sounds absolutely incredible. Yeah, idyllic and magical. Also, a similar kind of experience to what I had growing up as well. Just total freedom, and yeah, I it seems like those days are gone, no matter where you are. But I would like to think that I'm wrong.
I could say that the reason I'm here is because I'm looking at some houses because in this part of Florida, Marco Island's right next to the 10,000 Islands. And the 10,000 Islands is, I don't think it quite reaches 10,000 Islands, but it's a maze, a beautiful maze. You get lost. There's no civilization. And you literally are in mangrove islands, and then beautiful beaches show up, and there's not a human around. So there seems to be a few places left, and
Where you could still do that.
this is yeah, yeah, and still be 90 minutes from Miami or Tampa or something like this.
Alfonso, on I guess the last Florida question, although I do have another Miami question, but
Mhm.
on Florida specifically, what is the situation with alligators over there? Did you encounter many as a kid?
It's now booming. It was not. There was you were allowed to hunt alligators when I was a kid. So people hunted them almost out. So when I was a kid, water skiing and things like that, uh, in Miami we had crocodile, so saltwater crocodile. So South Africa, I don't think has this, but the saltwater crocodile was the one that we had to take care. But you never saw one. I never saw one. And now you see them all the time at the marinas. My sister lives a little further south, and she has one in the canal in the backyard that you have to
Wow.
take care. So now, because they have stopped hunting them, which is good, they are now a predator that you need to keep an eye out on.
Does that's got to surely impact your level of desire to go swimming?
It keeps
Or
me
are there
aware.
safe zones?
So far, there has not been a serious ocean attack. The lakes are where the alligators are, unfortunately, taking people every once in a while, but they take your animals. It's traumatizing for people. So the
Wow.
lakes, no
Okay.
way, no go.
Um, on the subject of Miami, I've heard so many different stories, and of course, there's all the infamous Scarface films and mafia and drug stories and gang stories and whatnot. But there seems to be like this, there's two sides to it. How would you describe Miami with regard to like being this idyllic setting, but also potentially quite dangerous? Is it just dramatized by the media and film?
It was not dramatized. I mean, it was obviously dramatized by the movie, but it was real. It was definitely real. Miami has had many different moods. So the moods of the 60s was very hippie community, especially I lived in Coconut Grove. The smell of things that you were still illegal to smoke was everywhere when you're walking to school but it was super
And the Bee
safe.
Gees as well.
And then the 70s brought the disco big time because of the Cuban community. I'm Cuban. And so it was very festive. And the Bee Gees moved in. And so it was a great time. It was still very safe. And this is the time when I was a kind of teenager. And I was water skiing 3 or 4 times a week. And, life was peaceful, natural, dolphins everywhere. Not the football team, but the real ones. And although in 1972 it was the real football team, the Dolphins. And anyway, the 80s hit hard. Definitely the drug trade took over suddenly out of nowhere, and it made it where people were dying. You in your school, a kid who's your friend and you have dinner with their parents, I remember we heard that his father was found in the trunk of his car with a bullet. I mean, it touched people's life, because innocent people, accountants, they have nothing to do with the drug trade, but they're needed by the drug trade, would be seduced by money, of course. And nice people had a very tough and rough ending. So all that stuff is true. I mean, they condensed 10 years into a 90-minute movie. But a lot of that stuff was happening. And then Miami after became safe again when all the attention came. And they cracked down quite hard. And then, like I mentioned, Stallone and Madonna were neighbors in Coconut Grove, in a very nice part of Coconut Grove. I would see her running, and
No.
and then Versace before her, of course, but he was more in Miami Beach. it was a cool place. I was now starting to be in university in New York City, so I would come every 2 months or so.
And you studied allegedly you studied fine art at Pratt Institute. Is that right?
Yes, I stumbled around. I started at the University of Florida because my father thought that if I wanted to be in the car business, I should learn some aerospace, aerodynamics and this kind of engineering. Um, Even though he was an architect, so he probably was aware of industrial design and all of this, but he thought because the audio industry was a bit obscure in that part of the United States, and I started failing big time. I didn't like engineering too much. It didn't like me even more, and so my mom said, "Hey, just revert to get your grades up. Go to fine art." I fell in love. I had always drawn in it as a kid and all this stuff, and I got into ceramic sculpture and figure drawing, and I fell in love with that. She then told me about a school in New York. It was a great school, and she encouraged me to go, and I was accepted. And then she called me that she found a school in Detroit, and this school did car design, and she knew I loved car design. So she said, just go. So I went. I mean, my mom was very tolerant of me transferring universities. And I loved the school and I loved car design, but it was so specialized. I'm going to tell you an embarrassing thing. I mean, I was into some interesting music from England and stuff like that. And I dressed like Napoleon. And this in 1984.
What music? Sorry, what music was it?
All the English music, all of it. I was big time into all that. I was in the dance scene in New York City, and it was a bit theatrical time in New York City. So we were very costume-like in our everyday life, gypsy-ish kind of. People were playing with the theater of life. And I was deep in it. I was a kid in New York City. I was 19. And so...
Did you ever manage to get into Studio 54?
Studio 54 had just
Sorry
closed.
To cut you off.
But after
okay.
there was some other super clubs just after that, which were also quite nice. The Limelight and some of these places. And... I liked some of the illegal ones, the Save the Robots, which was in the East Village. And that one opened up around 2:30 in the morning. It was a spectacular dance club, just really good. So anyway, you take the kid out of that scene and you put him into a very specialized, heavily endorsed by GM, Ford, and Chrysler auto design school. And they were very honest with me that they thought I should probably change a bit how I look and stuff like that. I mean, half of the hair was white, and I was a mess, really. I thought a acceptable mess, but the school was a little concerned about my ability to be employed. And so I went back to New York. And then I didn't study car design, but Nissan won an award back in '88 about the East and the West design cultures merging into one. And Nissan was at the time a significant force in the US, but very, very Japanese still at that time. So they went into the school, and the school asked me to present the curriculum, not myself. It was not an application for a job. I was already designing furniture in New York as a senior, and I loved it. The Koreans were just starting to come to the U.S., but with consumer electronics. And my teacher was, having me design a bunch of products for Samsung and Korean consumer products. And I was content. I was happy. Nissan said, "Hey, why don't you come to California?" And I said, whoa. California? No way. That's where all the nuts are. Yeah, this is Napoleon, right? Saying where the nuts are. And I had a very strong opinion about the East Coast and the West Coast. And I didn't want to go. And they said, come on, just come over. Just, take a contract for 3 months. You don't have to even apply for a permanent job. And I said, no, I'll try it. So I went on full. I was hired. And then 35 years later, here I sit with you explaining the story. So,
But are you actively applying to the company like Nissan? I mean, how did that materialize? Because I kind of missed the transition between like studying fine art, looking at CCS, going, that's not for me, sticking with the fine art. Are you still communicating with the auto industry, or did somebody kind of discover you?
yeah, it was an accidental discovery. They won the award. The school was part sponsor of the award. And they scrambled because I did have some car sketches from my CCS days. And they wanted to show the well-rounded. The school used to have a very strong automotive program in the 60s. And I had a portfolio of work that they felt showed the full range of the school. So I had my fine art, my sculpture, especially my figure drawing, because my car sketches were with charcoal on huge newsprint, like figure drawing. My cars were much closer to bodies than to cars. And just Nissan, the vice president, believed that you should hire in divergent pairs. So they had already hired a kid from the art center, like 1 week earlier, whose art center is, a very specialized school, great talents there and great skills. And they wanted to mix that, because Jerry Hirschberg really felt that the auto industry feeds off itself a bit. And that school, the kids were feeding off themselves a lot at that time. And that he wanted me to be a disruptor in the sense of, this kid is in love with cars, he thinks about cars, but he doesn't think about this. And that my presence and my drawings would move the kid. It wasn't supposed to be the other way, probably, but the kid moved me. And I started to pick up the techniques of art center and things like that. But I kept my naiveness, because that's what it is at the end of the day. Because I didn't do 4 years of just bang on car. I was willing to go places because I didn't know those were wrong. And I do think that this is what I try to ask my guys is, and what the beauty of working in Japan is because the cultures are so different. That what I have 2 directors that I brought from California, young guys, about 45. I believe their role is not to win all the programs because they're super good and they're capable. My thing is to inspire our Japanese team and to get that mix, to get that kind of creative tornado, and that some unusual things come from that magic. I believe that there are great cars out there. There is such a temptation. When the Velar came out, everyone wants to copy the Velar. I think there's some risk in the social media and the internet that now everyone, within a day of the launch of a car, everyone has seen it. And you do see a little bit like it's influencing a lot, everyone, including us. So I believe that that's something we have to take care of. Because the world wants a forest full of beautiful trees. We don't want one tree cloned all over the place. And anyway, that's a long answer, but it was an accident.
No, it's a good one.
It was a by chance kind of.
Don't you think that the auto industry in general has always kind of been like that? You know, there's always been this fixation with trends. And I discovered a Lotus race car today. I forget what it was called. And I looked at it and I was like, the volumes are exactly the same as a Ferrari P330, you know, and I was like, yeah, I mean, there were multiple race cars that always did that. And that also in normal standard consumer cars, there was always a thing like the fins, for example, in the 50s on cars. I mean, I've always seen that.
It's a shame. It's true. I think that even my favorite, my parents went to Europe when I was like 9. It was traumatizing. I said, Mom and Dad, where are you going? They went by themselves. What a nerve.
Oh, yes.
Such a nerve. And they came back with this beautiful little model of a Lola racing car. And of course, emotionally, I wanted to reject it because they abandoned me. And my brother and sister. But I love this car. And I thought it was such a special car. But to your point, actually, there were maybe a lot of cars a little bit like that. There is beauty in the nuanced proportion differences. But I do think we're probably guilty. I don't know why. And I don't want to say it's marketing. I don't want to say any of it because it's not. There is no smoking gun. There are choices and people like this and they think everyone likes it. And even within design, you know, like I've had conversations, you know, one of my this is a favorite one. And we were doing, you know, we work for Nissan. We love GTR. So we are always playing around, right? Even when we don't have a project. You know, designers, we do self projects in the company, and I flew to California, and the designers were excited to show me a model that was not self-generated. It's not a real project, and it was a beautiful car, like a bit somewhere between NSX and Ferrari, any one of the Ferraris. It was mid-engine proportion. I'm like, what a cool car. What is it? And then I start seeing some stickers as GTR. And I'm like, hold on a second. Yeah, this is a GTR? And they explained why it was perfect. I said, no. I'm not arguing it's not nearing perfection as an object. The balance, the design theme is new, cool. But you just can't throw GTR on anything. GTR is a specific animal, and it has a culture. It's a car with a culture. That is rare in our world. And you have to have respect for that culture and love that culture, and then want to join that culture by putting your fingerprint on it. And we can argue that it should be 2 + 2 or not. But I do think that those things create the volumes. Shiro, I think you know Shiro quite well. One of the most enlightening short sentences he gave me was, Alfonso, if someone came up to me and told me the GTR is beautiful, I failed. End of story. And he walked off.
But you know
this is GTR. There's that thing.
You know what's quite interesting though in the whole thing of, this, let's call it mimicry, where everybody takes inspiration from each other, is that like there's some interesting accidents that kind of happen along the way. And like, for example, I think especially like Japanese car design is quite a good example of that, especially if you go back, to things like the 240Z, for example. I don't profess to be an expert on that, but I mean, that clearly was taking inspiration from, the GTs of the European GTs of the time. And then in the process, they end up creating their own aesthetic and a completely it becomes its own thing. And this is also really interesting. It's kind of also like you can draw the parallel in music as well. You know, where the English bands were going over to the US to go and discover blues music, and they were coming back, and then they were trying to imitate, but they ended up creating their own thing in the process, which I think is fascinating.
And I think you just gave my job description and my description to my designers, especially the Western designers, is that one thing car designers tend to have is a bit of an ego. It doesn't come from being a type A personality, because I don't think designers are like that. We're a little bit vulnerable. Like, type A people, their character is undeniable and they don't have doubt. I think even the best designer, when you scratch a few skin cells, you will start to notice that the real character has a little bit of vulnerability, and that's where the art came from for many. It's not. And then when they start achieving success, they start building strength, and they believe that their way is the way. This happens a lot. I meet them all the time. And I think this is a problem when you work for a Japanese car company. Because I think unless you're Japanese, I think it's fine if you're Japanese. I don't think it's fine if you're a Westerner. Because I think exactly how you said it. The 240 is not an invention in the sense of a car. But it's Japanese. It's Japanese as hell. Because it's made from the hands of Japanese designers. And I really, really, really want to do that, because I feel that this is what's unique about Japanese car culture, is that there's a quirkiness, there's a charm, there's a kind of approachability. They want, of course, the designer wanted it to be a serious thing, but there is an element that you find, again, approachable is the best word for me. A BMW is a very serious object, a beautiful object. Japanese cars, yes, beautiful sometimes, but there is a warmth and there's an approachability that's reflecting the culture, I think. And I really want that. I think that we have to protect that in this global world where we're inspired every day by everything we do as a human. And I think you nailed it with that analogy, because it's true. It's true.
Alfonso, what was the grand plan with regard to your career? Was there was the whole thing mapped out for you? I mean, did your dad? I mean, you said your dad was an architect, and I wonder if he kind of sat you down and said, "Listen, son, if you want to go to the top, you need to have some plans in place." But it seems like you've got a rebellious streak, and you can't. It seemed like you just kind of took everything in your stride. I mean, what was the plan? Was there a plan?
No. So I'm going to put something more than just that. But fundamentally, my dad was a super talented architect, and he did a lot of things. And I mean, my favorite childhood memory, which is obscured by significant amount of time, was that, my dad landed in 1962. He was a young architect, 24-year-old architect in Cuba. He did a couple buildings. And then he lands penniless. He was in the underground, so he had to run out of there like a Johnny Cash song, right? Really quick. And he got a job in Miami, but struggle. By 1968, he opened up his firm with a partner, four partners, young guys, Cuban guys, and two American guys. And they get a call to design Richard Nixon's house in Miami when Richard Nixon was president. And
What?
I think for me, this is the American story, because with all the stuff that's happening and the country splitting in half, in a sense, well, not even in a sense, I think literally it's probably splitting in half. My memory and knowledge of the US is opportunity, because I have the guy I love dearly, my dad, is what kind of place after only 8 years in a country, and you get a tap on the shoulder and, hey, do you want to modify an existing house for the president of the United States. And my dad took me on our little boat, and I remember that the security came to us. We were going across the bay to the island where Nixon's house was, and I saw the helicopter pad. My dad he was there to review the progress on construction, and the helicopter pad was climbing up on it, and all the president wasn't there at that time. So security was a little bit less, but still that place was fully, there was guns, there was guys with guns. And, you look at your dad and you look at this and you're like, wow, that's kind of cool. And even though as a young kid, I experienced a little bit of anti-Cuban sentiment, I then had this on the other side, that the guy I saw on TV, he must have liked my dad enough to trust him with all the bulletproof stuff that had to happen and stuff like that. So anyway, getting into Nixon stuff is complicated because he liked the Cubans, it turned out, with the plumbers. The guys who broke into the Watergate Hotel were Cubans. So maybe he just liked Cubans. Hey, can you blame? We're not so bad.
But
anyway, I think we're drifting a little bit.
No, we're not drifting at all. This is about you and not necessarily about the company that you work for. But I was going to ask you actually about a little bit about that. So, like, you've just mentioned your dad. I understand your grandfather also. Did they come over together? Your father and your grandfather. Did they come over at the same time?
No, everyone was a bit in the early days. Especially, it depended on something happening. So my dad had to run out of there after the Bay of Pigs, because my dad was in the underground, and they were discovering, they're looking hard for the people who assisted. There was people in Cuba helping the preparation for the invasion, and my dad was fairly lucky that he became aware that they probably knew he was one of them, because my mom, his wife, is a political family, and her dad was in prison already. So, and her two brothers were in the invasion forces. They were on the CIA. And so my dad had to escape, so they left alone, but there was already Cubans here in Miami. So, and there was a Cuban community already right on the edge of the Everglades. The U.S. government was building homes, these little tiny homes. We were all living together. And my grandparents came in the late 60s through Mexico. My grandmother, my wonderful grandmother, was in the trunk of the car. It's a little bit, chokes me up a little bit to imagine my grandmother sneaking in like that. On my grandmother on my father's side, they were not political. My mom's father didn't get out until the 80s, after 14 years in prison. So.
And that's it's unimaginable. I mean, you just can't really comprehend that sort of stuff, I mean, were you born?
No.
So you were born in Cuba, or were you born in the U.S.?
In the U.S., in Miami. My brother was conceived in Cuba. He was older than me, but he was born. So my mom, part of the trauma of getting out my dad had an Edsel, getting back to the cars. He had a 57 Edsel, or 56, sorry. And I want to find this car, by the way. But anyway, it's in Cuba, probably with some kind of Russian tractor engine in it. And he had to bribe his way out, so he gave the car to the gates of an embassy. I forget which one it was. So it was that kind of just, let's go. It's dark. And my mom about 5 months pregnant with my brother. So my dad when I see pictures of them in Miami, and I see their faces, and I just don't know how they can have a calm expression with what they dealt with. Especially my mom, her two brothers are now in prison, not with her dad. They were with the invasion force prisoners, which she had already heard were being killed. And then her dear dad, I think it had to have been traumatic as hell. Traumatic doesn't capture it.
No.
But we were born in this kind of this circumstance. But it's not like they talked about it as, of course, I understood it to be a tough time, and Cuba was not Castro was not a positive person in the house. And Che Guevara, especially, those T-shirts, most people see a Che T-shirt and they, oh, that's cool. What's that? For Cubans, especially like my parents' generation, it's not anger, it's terror. Just pure terror. And a bit the experience of Cubans in the US is this conflict. Why American kids are wearing Che T-shirts? Don't they know what they did to... of course, I'm already a different generation, so I appreciate kids are a bit rebellious, and I didn't experience the horrors myself. So anyway, that's a big one. The Cuban experience from my generation is once removed from the real stuff, but the stories are like pictures, really. They're so clear that you almost don't need to go.
When did you become aware of what they had dealt with in coming to the US? Like, at what sort of age did the penny drop and go, oh my God, they went through this traumatic experience, and not just that, they had to start over?
Yeah, that's a great one, because now I'm trying to... My memory is that every weekend, the parties, the get-togethers, they talk constantly about it. And I think the Cubans have a reputation of living in yesterday. This is not a cruel depiction, I think, by others, because it's accurate, so it can't be cruel. The Cubans talk about it a lot, and they relive it, and maybe because it's a storytelling culture, history is by word of mouth. So, but your question is, when did I start to really understand it? Because probably I was hearing it from day one. But I think I probably was in my teens and starting to... I think when my grandfather showed up and we went to this little airport and picked him up, and we went by the big airport, and then we get he's not in the big airport, what's that? And he never spoke of Cuba, but it triggered all these welcome home get-togethers. And then you start understanding, oh my God, he's a hero, right? He was a governor and a senator, and he was thrown in his own home. They converted his home to the KGB of Cuba's headquarters in their city come away. And they put him in the basement for between 11 and 14 years. I forget the exact time. They would do in the huge garden that they had, because it became a political prisoner. There was many people in the basement. It was like a 2-winged mansion, which is probably part of the issue of the revolution. I fully recognize this. But they would have the firing squads, and he experienced a few where they don't shoot everyone. They line them up, and some get shot, some don't, because then others confess. It's a very good tactic. So you started becoming aware of much more detail of the horror. So I to your question, I think I must have been 12 or 13, because if I knew all this stuff, if I was conscious of these stories, I wouldn't have slept at night. So somehow the human mind is deflecting the detail, because the detail was being talked about. My uncle had a ranch. He was also, like my dad, in his 20s during the revolution. And they had horses, and his dad was getting sick during the revolution. And slowly Che Guevara's guys were taking land all over Cuba, and they were shrinking his ranch. And eventually, my uncle always says that the best thing that happened to his father was to die early. Because if he would have seen this, the end, it would have killed him. Because eventually they put a fence around the house only, and they rode his horses around them all day long. And my uncle finally, when he was 22 or 3, he just had to escape, because he couldn't handle. He thought he was going to do something, like get violent, and that would give them an excuse to just kill him on the spot. The cruelty of any revolution is that it's not like they kill everyone, right? That's not practical, and it's not. I'm sorry to say it like that, but they simply don't do that. Even of their enemies, they don't. And like his case, they didn't. He was a landowner, but he was a kid. They just felt he was a nuisance and stuff like that. But he felt he was going to do something. He couldn't control his emotion. So these stories are all around. Every Cuban that you meet that's 57 years old probably had parents who went through some stuff.
Wow. I think it's what's fascinating is how quickly, seemingly quickly, your parents were able to rebuild their lives. You know, if you're saying that, you know, your dad was designing the president's house, or within 8 years of arriving, I mean, I imagine then by the time you are ready to go off to university, that things are pretty stable at home, and you don't. It doesn't appear that there was this dark cloud hanging over your head with regard to, like, I better not screw this up, because, you know, some massive, massive sacrifices have been made for me to be here.
You're right.
Which is not a negative thing. That's not a negative thing. I think that's a very positive thing, because I think that too much of that can be kind of detrimental to making good decisions. So I'm just quite intrigued about what sort of a mindset you would have been in going into to college, because it seems like you had a very rich experience at university. I mean, especially with you don't seem like you were weighed down by anything. Like you were just like, you know, no, I'm not really interested in that. I like the fine art thing. I still like cars. It's going to work out. I'm not too stressed about it. I mean, how would you say that what sort of a mindset were you in when you went off to college?
I have the best parents in the world. They passed 10 years ago or 12 years ago. Because you're right, they didn't make me feel I was going to fail. Now, they didn't make me feel I was going to succeed either. So it's a weird place in between that one of the biggest things in the Cuban community is anyone studying fine art is, in a group of people that are just recently coming to a country and scrambling just to get food on the table. Hey, Dad, I want to be an artist. Probably that's the kind of,
like, no ways.
not something you say. You don't say that before dinner, and you probably don't say that after dinner because it's going to disrupt the meal, the digestion. But my dad, because probably he identified with me, I was a fanatic of drawing, and he enjoyed it. And when I went to his studio every day, and he loved that. I would draw with him, and I watch him draw and his guys draw, and it was spectacular. I didn't feel to go on a journey of design or art was a risk. I didn't know if I was good enough. I knew I could draw the creation of Adam because I did it a million times because my mother bought me Michelangelo books. I knew I could do that, but I didn't understand where that would go. And then as a young kid in university, I would find these little holes that were cozy for me, even though I didn't think I was great or anything like that. But I was able to find little jobs, and I had a guy in Detroit who loved my drawings, and he gave me an apartment in Brooklyn. Not he rented it for me. Yeah. So I had these very strange people supporting me emotionally and some financially, which made me feel, okay, this is how you live, right? You do a little project here, you do an executive table, modern thing for some guy's office in New York City, and you get surprising money for that. As a kid, right? It probably wasn't anything, but for me it was like, wow, I can go to my favorite Cuban restaurant in New York City. And I was designing helicopters for a guy in Detroit. He never made any of them, but he liked the drawings. So when Nissan came, I didn't think I needed that because I was happy. I had the clubs. I was a kid. I had work. I could feed myself. My parents were happy. They were encouraged with that I was becoming a young man. They didn't, like you asked, was my life mapped out, and did they help? No, they were just super supportive of anything I did, including my failures. They were not critical of me, which, you know me now, so maybe you don't realize, to be a little red-headed, freckle-faced Cuban in Miami, to be honest, you're kind of rejected by both sides. So, I was safe at home. Home was my oxygen because my mother was feeding me Michelangelo books. My dad was a living example. Right? I saw buildings go from his little notepad when he's watching TV to the models in his wonderful studio in Coconut Grove. And then I'd walk those buildings when they're freshly cast concrete, because my dad was a concrete freak. He loved cast buildings. And when you go into a shell that has just been poured and there's no windows, there's no railings, there's nothing but concrete, the smell of that green concrete, it's still in my mind. And I just would look at him and I'm like, it's so cool, right? You're making things like that. So I had all this context that And then, when you're in art school, you're making things. So it was easy to imagine I'm learning, and that some way, if I just work hard, and I never stopped working, I was Mr. All-Nighter. So I was either making helicopters for the guy in Detroit, making furniture for my teachers, or flashlights for the Koreans, and then my own work at school. I never went to sleep. That's why I'd go to Save the Robots, because they opened at 3 or 2. So I can do all my work until 3, jump on the train, go to the club, 9 a.m., come back, and go to school. Sleep at lunch.
Wow, what an experience.
Yeah.
So
I recommend it.
So and car design was at the back of your mind all the time, or did you become less idealistic about it in your time in New York?
Yeah, I had. It's not that I forgot it, but I became distracted by other things. I think that it's hard to. Some kids ask me, like, I just went to Pratt, and I talked to some of the kids. They asked how they did it, because they don't have that many kids going to the car industry. And I said, the advice I give you, it's going to be hard to duplicate it, because what happened to me was my year in Detroit. And I lived in the dorm with all these kids who were just breathing and eating cars and drawing just car. And they would develop an ability that was so impressive. And I did too, because I was with them. And that never left me. When I went back to New York, I still was a drawing freak. I drew all the time. And what people schools maybe don't understand, other than CCS and Detroit and the Art Center, is that the hand to the brain is a muscle that needs to be worked out. And you have to almost beat up the kids. Like, we had to fill up an entire pad of huge newsprint of 100 pages every Thursday. I'm talking about one day. You had to draw anything. They just want you to look at something and draw it. And you end up becoming a surgeon, an assassin, with your charcoal or your pencil. And this is a story I tell the kids at Pratt. I go, what Pratt had was this philosophy and this artistic journey where they want you to study and read books and look at life and reflect life in your art. Those other schools don't have time for that, because they're focusing on the car. So I do think that the best school is in between, because the Finns that you mentioned of the 50s, this was because society was in love with the rocket age, the jet engine, and all of this stuff. And I think that designers, we have to be looking out, reflect the good and the bad of life, and let that shape our work. And that makes our work connect to human beings, because they see a little bit of this and that in the context of the work. So anyway, I was blessed with this journey, and because I think it helped me eventually become head of design for a Japanese car company, where I'm responsible for even the business cards. And I don't know if I don't have one here, but later I should send it to you. To be in Japan, and you can play in Japan. It's even in a huge company like Nissan. You can play, because it's just the way it is. You can, when we did the buses, so we do buses, for the campus. My campus has 30,000 people. We have a bus system going from the train station, and we wrap the buses with these great colors and stuff. One is yellow like the Z, and one is like a Figaro, it's like a minty green, and we have all this stuff. We're we're like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and we don't only do cars. We do uniforms for the factory guys who are our brothers and sisters. We do dealerships. We do architecture. I do sculpture, public sculpture. You need to know everything. Of course, you need to know how to make a beautiful car, fundamentally. But especially now, the car is more than just a car. It's all the connectivity, and all the humans are now in love with connectivity and all this stuff. You need to be more than an exterior car designer in this to become head of design, for sure.
There was two different things I was going to pull out of that. The first thing was where you were talking about this connection, but the first part of that anecdote that you beautifully unraveled was the connection of the brain to the hand with regard to developing your drawing skill. But it's basically your language of design. It's being able to communicate whatever's inside your head, and it's developing that muscle. And this is a theme that comes up time and time again, where it seems like there's very few schools where they are able to effectively teach or inspire the development of that, as well as mindset as well. Where often there are some institutions where they talk about mindset, the theory of design, and looking at different disciplines. But quite often, places like that are somehow lacking in the practical skills. And then there are other places that inspire the practical skills, and they show you how to draw a car, but there's something missing in the thinking. And there are places that do both, but it's a rare thing. And it's a great source of disappointment for me in terms of the experience that I had. And it's always obvious that the people that have succeeded are people that understood quite early on the importance of both and the development of both. And I don't really have a question for you, because you've explained a lot of where your thinking came, but you also, I guess, the CCS was like a really positive experience in terms of like developing the craft, so to speak. But then you had all this cultural influence, both from your family and your period in growing up in Miami, but then also what you were getting out of the whole New York scene. And I think that it answers a lot of questions about how you have got to where you got.
Yeah, I do think that I do have great interest of helping. I want to make a school like that. I think that it probably needs more than 4 years is the problem, because it's true that what CCS gave me was I knew what the studio would be like. And it's true. It's like that. When I joined even a small studio in California, which only had 35 people, it was a sketch machine. You were just sketching cars for 9 hours a day. And just searching for ideas, and you were floating alone. No one's helping you find your ideas. In a sense, that's like these sketch machine schools or design machine schools, because they're taught by people from studios, and that's what they're preparing kids for the real world. So there's a huge value. I just don't think everyone should be like that, because back to Jerry Hirschberg's notion of hiring in divergent pairs, I think there's beauty in what you don't know. And there is beauty in the things that are not in your heart and your head. And that somehow helping kids break out of, one of my favorite experiences 2 years in, 1 year in, is I designed a yacht for a shipyard in Turkey, 133 meter. And I was designing that at the same time that I was working on the Infiniti J30, which was my first car program. And I had my clay model of the boat and the clay model of the car. I was designing the rear. I was a kid. And that studio really understood, because the Hirschberg, again, he believed that you need to break your out of the car frame of mind and to discover new things. So we designed golf clubs for TaylorMade. We designed boats for the shipyard. We designed children's furniture. His belief was that it would free your mind, get out of Motor Trend magazine, because we didn't have the internet. And, don't just look at other cars that you love and then make a Nissan Pathfinder. You really should look for some triggers. So, and I can say that on the two-door Pathfinder, the first one, that little triangulated window that is on that vehicle, this is not an automotive detail. This is kind of a product, industrial design influence. And so I believe it, and I've seen it, and I experienced it for myself, and so I'm a believer in that. And someday I'd really like to spend more time when I'm not working on the car stuff, and because I think some kids, it will help some kids, and then it'll help the industry, because you'll get a wider. I don't want all cars to look alike.
Yeah, it's a constant wrestle, I guess. I mean, it's one thing anybody can make something different for the sake of different sake. But the idea is still, regardless of how romantic we want to be about it, it should still be appealing visually, at least compelling or interesting for somebody to want to buy it or lease it or whatever the case is. And it's and I think that's why exterior design in particular is for me, I think they don't always get enough. I mean, they get plenty of credit, but it's easy to dumb down exterior design, saying like, it's just it's mindless sketching, and I think to do something new that's credible on existing architecture it's not an easy thing to get right. It's a very, very complex. It's a very, very complex thing, and it's a difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing.
Yeah, especially all the way to the end. First of all, it's hard enough to get an idea that you like. This is also a lifetime of experience and practice, and sketching has to just gel at a moment around the package that maybe doesn't relate to this dream you had. So even in the first week or a month, that's already hard to get a design selected, because it makes sense to people. People see it and they feel something, right? And it's a beautiful process. Then the journey to get it through all the hinge points and to get those sight angles and the right shoulder room and this and that. Wow, that's a journey. It's a painful journey for the design team, and especially the author goes through hell. And it's true, it's a different experience for the interior designers, who probably it's not quite the eureka type of sketch, that happens with exterior design. It's becoming more, because I have experienced these eureka moments. I have seen it with my team, even recently. And but the battle starts almost before. You were already deep in the mud, especially now with all the screens and how quickly screens are changing, and the shifter, no shifter, where's the shifter? No door handles inside or outside. Their world is so, they're part, science student, filmmakers with all the graphics that is happening, animations. It's really a great honor to watch the journey of that in the last 20, especially last 20 or 15 years. It's been crazy. So you need the butterflies. The butterflies I call the pure dreamers. And then you surround them at a kind of respectful distance with people who have put cars together before, and respect the butterfly enough to not assume everything is wrong. I think that the biggest danger when I look at the training of managers is they rely on their knowledge. But history sometimes teaches you too much of the things you cannot do, more than allowing time to, because time changes what you can do. So ideas or feelings that you had 10 years ago, not that they're relevant anymore, but you should never use your experience of things you couldn't get done in today's world, because you can get it done. It's more likely you can get it done. It might be too much money, but the advances on the ability to make things is really impressive.
You mentioned earlier on that what you love about Japan, and I guess particularly Nissan, is that you are able to play. And I feel that when I got into the business, which is 5 minutes compared to you, I was just over, 11 years ago. It felt like there was more, not that you were playing, but there was a lot more time to play. And then I came over to Europe, and things started to change a lot. The time scales got tighter, and I thought it was just time for experimentation / playing. Yeah. And how much of that has affected your ability to play in Japan?
Big time. So I joined Nissan in 1988. 34 people. We did 1.5 cars a year. A year. 1.5. The pace didn't feel slow, actually, to me. Hustling. When I left the studio in 2012, that year we did 37 programs. It was just we're a 60 car company. We make 60 different cars, and the speed was crazy then. That's 2012. Now it's even accelerated beyond, because with VR and all of this stuff, and the speed of polygonal digital modeling, and our designers are making models themselves, and their professional modelers are perfecting them. We're just flying. We're flying. We've been able to cut even from that number that I experienced. But you kind of adapt. You need to adapt anyway. And you just need to invest in creative activities beyond the specific car. So you keep, we have this notion we call Studio 6, stands for 6 Sense. What do we use a number? 6. We need to feed intuition more than ever, because you jump now. You need to already have things percolating, because I have had some programs where we really want to make a full movie experience, and we have a week or two, and we have nothing. And this kind of thing didn't happen before, and it becomes quite serious. And especially, we have alliance partners, Renault and Mitsubishi. That maybe something comes up and they have a cool thing that they say, hey, do you guys want to join this program? And we do proof of concepts. So these are the short ones, but they're super important because they can trigger a car, which is, €1 billion or whatever. And so you need to nail it as if it was a 1-year program, but it's only a proof of concept. They're super rich. They're super exciting. You just learn, again, back to the Studio 6, you got to feed that intuition, gets these aesthetic gems ready to go. And then it becomes a process of executing. So back to the hand and the eye, right? We're not sketching that much anymore, but it's not different. It's probably I was too blunt to say the hand and the eye, because it can be the finger, right? It can be the mouse or something when you're digitally. I use Photoshop. I'm still drawing and clay modeling and all that. So I love this stuff. So the guys make fun of me because I do Photoshop renderings of cars with my mouse. So I hit the airbrush, I hit it, and then I morph it as a sculpture. And that's how I create the cores of the car and stuff like that. And then I use paths for all my lines and stuff. So I'm a bit old, as you mentioned, you were only 5 minutes compared to me. Yeah, a little painful, but very correct. So your question was the speed, has it affected the play? We play fast. we learn to play. We don't play Monopoly. We can't play. No time for Monopoly. We have to play something.
Uno.
So a quicker game. Uno, yeah. So because it's still, Tokyo is a source of constant inspiration. Around every corner, you're struck by something, someone that is out of your body. It's out of your realm. It's out of your basket. And it triggers something that you just want to make it. You want to do something that reflects that moment. You felt coolness. Your eyes saw cool. And it's far enough from a car that it's not like you felt, oh, what if? And part of my job is architecture, like I mentioned. So I had 3 collaborations with Kengo Kuma, who's, I'm not sure if you're aware of this gentleman. He's one of the most famous Japanese modernists, and he became my mentor. It's just a wonderful experience. He's probably my dad's age, and my dad was a freak on the Olympic Stadium. Kenzo Tange did in '64, and so from a very young age, I saw Japanese architecture because my dad loved it. Their use of concrete. Japanese modernism was. There's a little Le Corbusier European modernism, but not, because they had this unique character, and the Olympic Stadium is one of the best examples. And to work with Kengo Kuma, you see firsthand how different he is than my experience with Western architects, and the humbleness of a master. Those two don't go together, right? Humbleness and a master. He's observing life and nature and letting that influence his grand work. And so, you have to, in life, you have to keep your eye open and your ear open, because there's some people saying things that are profound. And Kuma-san is really, it's been a wonderful 5-year journey with him it's ongoing, but they were great projects with him.
Is that how you managed to get this mentorship? Was that through a project that you guys worked on together initially?
Yes, when right before the original Tokyo Olympics was scheduled, was about when I became head of design, was 2017 April, and the CEO, not Mr. Gon, but Sayakawa-san, he also just became CEO, and he said that, Toyota is sponsoring the Olympics, so we cannot do anything related to the Olympics directly. So he said, please start thinking of disruptive things we can do that the media will see us also, because we are Tokyo, which is true. And he was a believer of that. And Nissan was born in Tokyo. And Toyota, a great company, is Nagoya, which is a little bit further down, closer to Kyoto. So he felt, because he was quite Japanese, he is quite Japanese, he wanted me to do some architecture. He said, think of anything, just come back to me in 2 months, because we're in a hurry, back to your rush thing. And he goes, don't worry, you're not alone. And so he invited me to dinner. And I show up at this little private room of a restaurant, and I open the door, and it's Kuma-san. And so it wasn't my connection, it was the CEO who he didn't want to give me a crazy project without support. And he was very generous and thoughtful that support is not money. Support is someone to look up to and to learn from. And he picked the best one, and he arranged everything. It was life sometimes gives you a gift that is just beyond monetary, beyond anything. Because I basically was with Kuma-san constantly driving around. I went to England with him because I was thinking, what if we ever had to move from our lovely Paddington studio in London? And then he made some proposals for us, and he's very generous. He lets me play with him and work with him, draw with him. And Sayakawa-san's dream is that we would then have an architecture studio. So he was encouraging me to understand the modern architect studio and what things I needed. So I then started hiring architects in my design studio, like a licensed one. So I don't think this happens other places, right? This kind of situation is, first of all, I think is uniquely Nissan. Nissan is a bit of a weird company, and you can play. Again, back to that word. You can play because you're in Japan, and Japan is cutting edge and tech, but it's also charming and funny and cute. People love the word cute, kawaii. Even adults, men who are 50 use that word. I don't think Cubans, 57-year-old Cubans shouldn't say that. Anyway.
Okay, are you were the first non-Japanese person to be the head of design at Nissan, and have you thought about what it was in yourself that they decided that you were the man for the job?
Yeah, I'm not sure they didn't make a mistake, but anyway, my life is this way. My life is this way. Like when you get into a big building and there's an elevator, you need to go to, you're going up with everyone, and it's very crowded. People slowly leave the elevator, and then suddenly you find that you're the only one on the elevator. That wasn't your decision. The circumstances, destiny, destinations. So I never expected any of my promotions, to be honest. I never thought I should have the promotion. And but I think it's some of these traits, what I had heard, because the first time I was surprised, when I was made associate director, I asked the company why they selected me, because I thought there was someone better than me in the studio, and that I was a bit confused. And then they said that the most important thing about a leader is not how good they are by themselves. It's really how good they make the people around them. Not just recognizing a superstar's sketch. Let's say the superstars are A category, category A. And then you have your category Bs, which are people who are very good, but maybe struggle with just bringing it together. And then there's maybe category C, which maybe they don't have authorship in them, but they have tremendous other capacities. And they said, yeah, you've made many of the Bs into As when they work with you. And that makes an army that's probably unbeatable. Wow. And that turned out to be that's my value, I guess, is that I can help ideas that are 90% there get the last bit. Now, mind you, 90% means zero, you're gone. In our business, as you know, the sketch that's selected is 100%. 99 is gone. So I do believe, and this is something that I love doing it also, is I play ping pong with my team. I grab their drawings because Photoshop allows us to do layers, and I play with their work, not mine. And I say, what if this? And we play back and forth. Ken Lee, who's a director now for me, he's a great guy. He runs our trucks, our big trucks, and our some cars like the Kicks, and he's the author of the Murano in the US. We're playing like this probably 10 times a day. Sends me something, I Photoshop on it, he Photoshops on it, and boom, 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 6 or 7 exchanges, we have a car. Matt Weaver in the UK, same way. It's just, I love this relationship, and I love this. These are type A guys, these are authors. But when we do that with our team, if we can have that tactile relationship, not be a director that points, that's good, but move that line up, and then go away and have your espresso in your padded office. That's shit, right? I hate that. I didn't like it when I was a kid, and I don't like it now. I believe that you show your vulnerability. Because if you jump on someone's sketch and do something, and it's bad, it's likely to be bad, actually. Because, I'm an old guy. But you start forming a bond and you show your vulnerability. Yes, I'm the boss, and eventually I'm going to make the call. That doesn't mean that before that day, we're not learning and bouncing and doing and inspiring. And so that kind of stuff has helped me along the way. And eventually I think when I left Europe and came to the US, I was in San Diego for 2 years. And in 2 years, we won 6 Go With Ones, which is a little bit unheard of. And that's when they dragged me to Japan for the second time. And then my projects in Japan were interesting. They liked the character of them. And I'm hardworking guy. I don't know. It's hard to say about yourself why you were selected, but I love the company. I was born in the company, basically. I love Japan. I want to make the best Japanese cars. I don't want to make a Cuban car. I do think it's because I don't have the biggest ego. I'm a bit, again, I'm the only redheaded, freckle-faced Cuban kid, so it's hard to be confident. So I listen a lot.
I have to say that your personality has surprised the hell out of me. I mean, I've met a couple of Nissan guys that have said very complimentary things about you, but like it's always, I mean, I always get surprised when I actually have a conversation with somebody, but the fact that, you're a lot more humble than what I expected. And I just, as you said, there's a master and humble don't necessarily go together. Now, I know that you probably say I don't view myself as a master, but you've ended up in a position that, you would suggest otherwise. And while, you've lived through this whole experience, I think you've been quite transparent in the fact that not everything was necessarily planned out. And it might come as some surprise to you, but getting to where you've got to is a huge mystery for a lot of people. Not you specifically, but how do I do that? Or how do I achieve that? Or is that something I want to achieve? And it seems like you are totally relaxed. At least that's the impression you give off in that role. And it's very intriguing.
It's weird, but there's a part of me that's comfortable, but a part of me that's very, very uncomfortable because it's. I must say, I think I'm a bit crazy because I am a bit of a fireball in the company. I lose my temper, not with my team, but with other functions. I'm quite protective, probably because I see vulnerability in the infant designs. And I don't like it if people don't see it. And, they don't see the value in something that someone is making. And, a big company is full of type AAA personalities, even a Japanese one. And it is true that you have to be tough. And it becomes exhausting for a character like myself because you do feel, my God, I have to fight every little thing. And I don't fight alone. I have my team, and I don't encourage them to be as wild as me. I'm over the line too much, to be honest. But I love my design team is because I know them all for a long time. I don't know. People don't, in Japanese car companies, people stay a long time. They don't jump around like other companies. So you end up, even with some of my so-called adversaries, I've known them since I was a kid. Outside of design, I mean. I've known them forever. So you have this weird relationship of, the journeys, and you don't go through this thing about not sure you should trust their opinion. Because in a sense, you recognize and trust the opinion. But you don't agree with it because you're fighting this other journey. And you're defending a journey that is incomplete and not perfect. We're dealing with imperfections. Probably back to your point that to get a design today all the way through, you're dealing with a maze, kind of a gauntlet, not a maze. And so you're fighting and you're defending. The Z car was just struggle and a half. No one wants to make a car like that in today's world. But that's not the only one. We made a Ken, back to Ken Lee. which is a great guy if you ever get a chance to talk to him. But he did a huge minor change of a car, a patrol in the Middle East. Very big, unusual, A-pillar forward and rear change. He took a car that was 13 or 14 years old and was doing okay, whatever, no reason to kill it, no reason to really do it. And he turned it into the number one profitable car in the company right now. It's just enormous success. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare every day. That poor guy, to convince people 5 cents here, 10 cents there, on a car that's 13 years old. Every turn you make, you encounter a technology that was old and it raised the budget. You have to make the change, but then you lose budget, right? So design is where I want to make a t-shirt, non-feature value, because in the accounting, there's feature value. So any kind of spec and stuff like that. Non-feature value are intangible things like design. So I'm Mr. Unfeature Value. Non-feature value. I love it.
And what car was that?
Superficial. It's so nice. The Nissan Patrol.
Nissan Patrol, wow.
It changed that car became number one in Saudi Arabia, kind of from opinions. And it changed part of the European business. So it helped Europe get through a rocky bit of time. What I've learned so much is we all want to design a brand new car. It's because it's the most free, of course. But for the company that you love, you just got to watch all of the opportunities and bring those opportunities to the company, even though you're going to get insulted by why are you looking at these things? Because some of them can make huge money and feed some of these other projects. So I do think that for people in design, especially when they get into management or any kind of strategic activity, is never take your eye off the support cars that can become a great car. And actually, at the end, make people happy when they buy it and make people proud, because that's what the car is. The car is not necessary, but it brings joy to people's lives. And we're the luckiest people in the world. We get to be the joy givers, the non-feature value joy. That's a new t-shirt. I'm going to have to go across my shoulders.
T-shirt. That's a great t-shirt. Yes. Yes. NFV. Yeah. Not NFT. NFV. Yeah. So, Alfonso, how do you split your year up in terms of, are you based in Tokyo? Are you spending a majority of your time in Tokyo?
Yeah, since COVID, I basically have only had 3 trips in 3 years. This is the first time I take like a vacation, actually. But in the normal times, I live in an airplane. But I don't know if we'll return to that normal. Because we had this idea that you had to go to the studio and have 2 reviews of the development of all the projects per studio. And when you have as many studios as we have, thus live on an airplane. But with live VR, international live VR is spectacular. I'm really shocked and so happy with the level that the tech guys have really played a key role, really. And I don't mean our tech guys, they have also, but I'm talking about Autodesk and all of those. They have been so helpful for me personally. They have been so involved with our Nissan design studio. And I have 50 or so goggles for my guys, and I have one in my office. My office is all set up. I'm American, right? I was Cuban, but raised, we invented the remote control. The Americans did. Because we didn't want to stand up and change the channel on the TV. So now I don't even need to get off my desk. I have the 60 cars right in my goggles, sitting at my desk. And when I don't know if you've experienced a live VR session, it's really wonderful, where you hear the voices of everyone because the earphones are so nice. So before, you used to hear one or two voices at a car review because the more shy people kind of back off. But now, because you can see their avatars moving around, where the people don't sit behind you, they don't know where you are, or they should know because they see the avatar. But you see them and you ask them, hey, what do you think of that? What are you looking at? You're very close to the car. But you're in Tokyo, you're in Japan, and they're in San Diego or London.
Yeah.
And the level of visualization has become so clear that I don't think we'll go to traveling as much, but we need travel because with the personalities and the ideas, some of the ideas are in the corner of the studio, they're not what you went to look for. There's something else. Life is a journey of what you didn't intend.
I think we probably need to wrap up pretty soon, Alfonso, because you're on holiday and I've got kids that need to be looked after as well, and some work to do as well. I got two questions for you. The first question is, you mentioned Shiro earlier on. What was the biggest lesson that you had learned from him?
Strategy and business. He made a drawing, a doodle. One of his first very harsh criticisms of me when I was a director in North America. This is probably 1.5 years into his 20-year run. So I would guess this is 2003 or something like that. And he was very mad. He walked the studio. He was very bothered, not mad. He didn't intend to lose his temper. And he sat me down. He goes, Alfonso, a lot of good stuff. So many good stuff. You're burning your guys out. This stuff is unusable for us. And then he showed up a circle, drew a circle. And he says, you guys are drawing on 360 degrees. Starting tomorrow, 30 degrees. Manage. Make a strategy. Make a plan. Encourage, inspire your team to follow that plan. Freedom is a waste of humanity. Something like this. It was so deep, actually, that it was true. I was wasting people's lives, basically, by giving them freedom. Because it was freedom and they're going to fail, meaning they're not going to get anything selected because they weren't working with the strategy of the company. And yes, I was a director. I probably should have known that, but that was the culture of the California studio. We were intentionally contrarian. But he taught me how you can be a disruptor or an inspiration, even in that 30 degree, because if you go to the edge of the 30, you're probably outside of the comfort zone of himself, sure. Because he's managing 60 programs like I am today. And maybe him and I differ in something we can cover a little bit later. But, so that was the big one, because it moved me fundamentally, changed me overnight. Like literally the next day, seldom do you get a sentence in a harsh tone that rings so true that it washes your history away. And it did. And the next one was, he taught me business. He taught me how that most of the company, they don't recognize good design really from a bad or marginal design. They don't understand what we do. But they will respect us if you have a powerful business management of your function. You know, we spend a lot of money of the company. You know, we're not the biggest function, but you know, we're 800 people, and we're burning you know, cash on all our beautiful models and computers and all of this stuff that we and people. And he said, if you show your mastery of the business, including the budgets of the cars themselves, that you will find that people are already leaning on you more because you're coming into their world of business mastery. So I think especially this is a very important lesson that he gave me, and I saw it because I was very close to him for his last, I was literally next to him for his last. Wow. So I was there 2002 until he retired in 17. So I saw him, the master, wow. In full detail. And it was different than the Shiro I knew from a distance. It was a lot of preparation. He was a consummate preparer of things. And I can't be Shiro, but to know him more allowed me to know where I need to, some things that I fundamentally must do. I can do them my way, but I must cover these grounds to be credible in the company. And to be credible in the company is important to get you to convince people of things that then maybe they don't.
How? No. Sorry, finish that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that getting the company to trust design is not just that you make something beautiful, because yes, you just can't guarantee that beauty is not always like that. Beauty has ugly days, and if they trust you trust your character, trust that you are committed, trust that all of these things that you care about their cares, because if they don't feel you have their back, they are going to watch you. So this whole thing of trust and how he had that were things that I had to learn very quickly, and learn to be patient and listen, even if you're fighting and combative sometimes. If they know it's because your heart is maybe bigger than your mouth, and the sound gets muffled by that, the compression from your heart out your mouth. That doesn't make sense. I apologize. But anyway, it feels like what I feel like sometimes.
No, I understand. It makes sense.
So she was a huge lesson, obviously, for me then.
And the business aspects, did you learn, apart from the philosophical lesson that you learned? I mean, did you actually pick up daily practices from him in terms of the business?
Oh, yeah.
Or did you have to use your own kind of initiative to go and get help from elsewhere?
I didn't get help from elsewhere because I saw it in his management of the team as so detailed. It's impossible for me to ever do it, but it's a university. It's the Shiro University to watch it, and especially his knowledge of everything. Some of it just came naturally because he was very generous and he gave me expanded responsibilities. I say generous, but maybe he recognized my weakness and he said, okay, I got this guy. This guy's a unicycle. I got to get some more wheels on that. And so he gave me business. Right. My last year, he gave me full control of his last year. He gave me full control of the business. Like overnight, he says, okay, Alfonso, it's time. You're running all of the budgets in the function. I'm like, oh, okay. And he goes, you're gonna, and he moved my desk, and I was still running Infinity Design, but it was a immersion. And then I had to present. He still joined those business meetings. So if I did something that he didn't like, correction time. And in a Japanese culture, they want to follow the top guy. This is natural. Every culture probably is like that. When the top guy gives authority to number two, they're watching that relationship. As soon as any confidence is diminished with the number two, which was me at the time, they will ignore me. You will be in isolation. It's a very polite isolation. You're never going to know you're isolated, except one day you realize no one's spoken to you in 5 days. And in this world, that's a eternity. So these things I just learned from him. I learned to take care of all the details, follow the projects, get a sense of when someone is struggling, because that'll trigger financial struggle. And you just got to keep your eyes open. And then he always was a consummate lover of design, so he was reading books and stuff, and so he was the full human to me. And so every day I try to be something like him.
It's fascinating that somebody like that has got so many levels to them, but obviously it's needed, in a role like that, in a role like yours now as well, where designers tend to forget that there's a whole business to run and not just looking after the perfect silhouette, and one forgets that there are all these things that need to be looked after, like a budget, for example, like a strategy and planning and all that sort of stuff. I mean, these terms get thrown around a lot, but most creatives are not, it's not that they're not capable, but they're not equipped to kind of deal with that, until you are mentored by somebody in some sort of capacity with regard to how to manage that. And I think to have somebody like Shiro be that person, I mean, it's such a gift, and you've had quite a ride.
Yes,
Alfonso. Yes. You've had quite a ride.
And thank God he gave me an extra wheel, because the unicycle would have been terrible. Long ride on a unicycle is...
No. Well, I mean, you could be lucky that you've never been an alias modeler, because you kind of by default become, I don't know, you feel like a unicycle because you get pigeonholed. Modelers obviously bring so much physical and digital to the process, but you sometimes feel like, well, hang on a second, you don't think too much, just stay on that one wheel, and that can be incredibly limiting. But it wasn't a rant. It was I was gonna say that, one of the questions I had for you actually is how have you stayed in a company for as long as you have, and you still genuinely seem interested and really passionate. I mean, you like most people in your position would be like very, I don't know, it would the passion for the company or the job would come across contrived, and I don't get that feeling with you at all. You seem genuinely excited by the business and by the people, and this conversation has answered that question by and large, So
And probably because we didn't
yeah.
touch a lot, because it probably would take a long time. But the Nissan has changed a few times, so it hasn't been one company. The name has not changed, but we have gone through so many moods that, and right now we're in a mood, a company that's 3 years old, basically. New CEOs, new COO, very active COO, Ashwani Gupta, and Uchida-san, the CEO, is super active. It's a new generation. They're young. They're in their 50s, and they're changing. It doesn't resemble too much 10 years ago. Shiro probably wouldn't recognize the new Nissan, because even though the people have not all changed, it's probably one of the beauties of Japan is that when there is a new direction, there's a new direction, and no one is saying, "Oh, remember the good old days." We don't do it, and it's just full speed, and so you feel young constantly. You feel this weird revival, and you get inspired by the energy of other functions that are doing something, and this is the new journey. For that new journey, we have to change everything. So you feel like, you're building.
But those changes are, I mean, in most corporations, to endure more than, I mean, endure is not the right word, but to have existed and thrived in an organization for more than 3 decades, the changes that come along with that are quite often not necessarily an enjoyable experience, because you might have a new CEO that come in and with a particular agenda, that's not always I don't know what the word is, a happy, positive thing. There's often some very serious decisions that need to be made, and that can quite often affect the people. Well, it always affects the people, but it can be a very negative thing. Like if you've got somebody that's got an agenda of like, we need to save every single penny, well, that often comes at the expense of people's livelihoods, or just it sucks the enjoyment out of us kids that just want to play.
Yeah, I'm a little bit lucky that the rather drastic changes that have happened a few times, we found creativity in it. Even my function, I have cut my development function from Shiro's era by almost 30%. Not because someone told me, but because I was worried that with the new connectivity and all these new things that are coming, the way we were doing the previous stuff needs to lose 30%, because this other stuff is going to grow so much. And I think this is probably happening in every car company, and it just depends your mindset. We should just look at it as a creative exercise. Probably because I initiated, nobody asked me. You don't get the heat of the wolf.
But that's the best way to do things.
Yeah.
To initiate it yourself. It's almost like in anything that you do, basically, it's always better to be the one to if something's got to get done, it's better to just do it using your own initiative than to have somebody come and ask you. Not just, for your own personal, just from a personal aspect, it's better to do that. It feels better.
I think that what I would advise anyone who's going through a big change in the company is to try to understand with full objectivity what happened, and to get ahead of it. Because all of us, when things are going downhill, you can see things. It doesn't mean you were doing anything wrong, but you recognize that the company was having some issue. And you get ahead of it, you get ready, you reflect on things you can do for the new company. Because at the end of the day, it's our love, right, of designing and creating. It doesn't matter how we're doing it. Even if we have to revert back to the charcoal and the newsprint, we still love that. Just keep your agility. Remember, you love the gifts that we have and the opportunity. Anyway, I think that helps during change. Is you have to just be objective and be a student of life for those painful 6 months, and then build the new you.
Alfonso, before I say goodbye, I've got a personal request. A very good friend of mine works for the company, but he is. I met my wife through him. He's a Polish guy, and he's an accountant for Nissan in Warsaw. When he joined the company, he's been, ever since he tends to wear his heart on his sleeve with regard to these things. But like when he joined the company, he's overnight like the biggest fan, and he still is. And I started this podcast just over 2 years ago, and he's been pressurizing me ever since. Like, you got to get Alfonso on. You got to get Alfonso on. So we finally managed to get that, to bring that to life. But I just, I wanted to give a shout out to him. His name's Jacob. And I think it's going to mean a lot for him that this has finally happened. And I just wanted to know if you could give him a very brief shout out. His name's Jacob Pach.
Jacob Pach. Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. First of all, this has been great. And then his journey, to have a big heart, the company needs big hearts. Sometimes makes the journey a little rougher for oneself, but I appreciate that he was nudging you, and I have had a great time today, and we covered much more than I thought we were going to cover. It felt like a therapy session.
I told you it would be I told you it'd be an experience that you've probably not had before. I mean, it's not. I don't know. I'm obviously not a trained media person, and this is not a traditional media source, so. There's a lot of biographical stuff, that people don't often cover in these things, and which I think is far more interesting than just like, tell me about your favorite masterpiece that you created. There's time for that as well, but like it's all the lessons that one learns along the way, especially somebody like yourself that has experienced all these different things, and there's a lot of questions, that I have, let alone some students, with regard to how you end up in a position that you've ended up in, and these formative experiences that you have as a child and a child with parents that have experienced the things that yours did, all of these things consciously or subconsciously have an impact on the development that you have. So, these things are really interesting to me, and there's so much value in these stories as well. So, I wasn't, the idea is not to psychoanalyze you.
But it felt good.
Okay, well, that's the most important thing. And I'm glad it did, and I'm glad I thoroughly enjoyed it too. I really, really did. And I have to thank you for being so generous with your time and for getting back to me so quickly, and just for making it easy, to talk to you and just being so accessible. So I can only thank you for that.
Thank you. and we'll bump into each other soon, hopefully.
For sure, absolutely, absolutely. I'm totally intrigued by Japan. Fabio Filippini, Shiro as well, and I've got a couple of other friends that my friend Alan DeRosier, he lived over in Japan as well, and it's a fascinating place. I would love to experience it. Tokyo is a very, very interesting, at least in my mind anyway, but from what everybody said, a city and a place that I would love to experience. So maybe it's going to be in Japan. I don't know. Who knows? But we'll definitely bump into each other at some point.